Okay, welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
So this is where you, our listeners, bring us your sources. Could be articles, market reports, research, really, whatever you're curious about.
And we just sort of we try to pull out the absolute most important nuggets, the key insights.
Yeah, think of it as your shortcut to being well-informed, hopefully with, just enough surprising facts to keep things interesting.
Definitely.
And for this deep dive, you've sent us some market trend data. It's specifically focused on the global market for, get this, plant anatomical model.
Plant anatomical models. Okay, yeah, it might sound incredibly niche at first, like plant what now?
Right.
But our mission here, working just with the data you've given us, is to really understand this specific market. We want to map its size, its growth, and see where the big shifts in investments are happening globally, all based strictly on these numbers.
Exactly. And sometimes the most fascinating insights, the ones that hint at broader trends in science or education, well, they pop up in these kinds of unexpected places.
That's often true.
So let's see what this deep dive into plant models tells us about, maybe, the bigger picture.
Okay. Well, what's immediately clear from the source data is that this isn't just some tiny static market, not at all.
Right.
The global overview shows the market for these plant anatomical models was valued at $221.2 million back in 2021.
That's pretty significant already. And the projections, they're pointing upwards, clearly.
Yeah, clear upward trend.
The data forecasts it reaching $282.5 million just 4 years later in 2025. And then it nearly doubles from that 2021 number, jumping to an impressive $460.5 million by 2033.
That's quite a climb. And that trajectory works out to a solid compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 6.3% globally over that whole 12-year period.
6.3% global CAGR, okay?
Yeah, and that kind of consistent, pretty robust growth.
Yeah.
It signals that these models are, more than just old school classroom props.
The source does highlight that, doesn't it? That they're seen as vital educational tools, scientific tools even, helping students, researchers.
Exactly, helping them really grasp the complex details of plant biology. So their continued market expansion isn't just about replacing old stuff.
It's a just ongoing, pretty substantial investment in these sort of foundational learning and research methods in life sciences.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But that investment isn't spread evenly across the globe.
Ah.
And that's where it starts to get really interesting looking at the regions.
Absolutely. Let's dive into North America first. The data shows this region had a big slice of the pie, $60.6 million in 2021.
It did. And North America is projected to basically mirror that global growth trend, expanding to $76.4 million by 2025, and then hitting $121.1 million by 2033.
Okay, and the CGR for the region?
It comes in at 5.9%, so just a little under the global average. Suggests, mature but definitely steady growth.
Right, and within North America, I assume the U.S. is leading.
Predictably, yes. The U.S. market was valued at $42 million back in 2021. Projected to grow to $81.3 million by 2033. That's a 5.7% CAGR. It's actually the largest single-country market, the source details anywhere.
Gotcha. But you said the regional KGR was 5.9%, so something else is pulling that average up slightly?
Well, what's notable here, according to the data, is Canada.
Okay.
Starts smaller, $11.2 million in 2021, but it shows a significantly higher projected CAGR. 6.9%.
Oh, wow. 6.9%.
Yeah, climbing to $26.1 million by 2033. So that growth rate actually outpaces the U.S. and the overall regional average.
Interesting. What about Mexico?
Mexico shows steady growth, too, from $7.4 million up to $13.7 million at 5.3% CGR.
Okay. So let's hop across the pond to Europe. The data said this was actually the largest regional market in 2021.
That's right, valued at $69 million then.
$69 million, okay.
And Europe is projected to keep up strong growth, reaching $87 million by 2025 and $139.3 million by 2033.
And the CGR there?
The regional CGR is 6.1%, so slightly higher than North America's.
Okay. Looking at specific countries in Europe, Germany seems to be the big player there.
Yes, Germany is the largest market in Europe, expanding from $20.4 million in 2021 to $43.1 million by 2033. That's a 6.4% CAGR. Strong.
But similar to Canada and North America, is there another country with an even faster growth rate?
There is. The United Kingdom really stands out in Europe based on this data.
How so?
is projected to jump from $9.8 million in 2021 all the way to $22.5 million by 2033.
Okay.
And that's with a strong 7% CAGR. The source specifically highlights that as the leading growth rate within the European region.
7% for the UK.
Got it.
Huh.
And we also see solid growth elsewhere.
We do. France moves from $12.2 million to $23.1 million. That's 5.4%. Italy, $6.4 million to $11.4 million at 5.1%. Russia is shown rising from $5.7 million to $10.6 million, a 5.3% CAGR. Spain grows from $4.2 million to $8 million, 5.8%.
Okay, quite a few listed there.
And the data even points out smaller but still growing markets, like Luxembourg is projected at 6.3% CAGR.
Right.
And then this collective rest of Europe category actually shows an even higher 6.8% CAGR from their 2021 values. Interesting. So that suggests pretty broad investment across the continent, not just in the, the biggest economies.
Seems that way, yes, based on these numbers.
Okay, now let's head over to Asia Pacific. The source described this region's AGR as the most dynamic.
That's the word they used, yes.
Yeah.
Dynamic. This market was worth $56.2 million in 2021.
56.2.
Indeed. And Asia Pacific is projected at $74.4 million by 2025.
Okay.
And expected to reach $126 million by 2033.
And that dynamic AGR?
It's 6.8% for the region overall. That's the highest among all the major regions detailed, so it underlines that dynamism.
Makes sense. China's rule.
China leads the region in market size, growing from $21.9 million in 2021 to $49.8 million by 2033.
And the growth rate?
A very robust 6.9% CJR.
Okay. Japan.
The grant also shows strong expansion, moving from $9.6 million up to $20.3 million. That's at 6.2%.
All right, but you mentioned dynamic. Is there a specific standout in Asia Pacific like the UK or Canada or elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. The data specifically highlights India as exhibiting the fastest growth, not just in Asia Pacific, but among all the individual countries that are broken out across all regions in this source.
Wow. Okay, what are the numbers?
India leaps from $10.6 million in 2021 to $26.1 million by 2033.
Okay.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
To $26.1 million by 2033.
Okay.
Driven by an impressive 7.7% CAGR.
7.7%. That is genuinely significant growth. Does the source give any clues why India's rate is accelerating so much?
Well, the source itself doesn't provide, specific commentary explaining the why behind each country's rate.
Right, just the numbers.
Just numbers. But seeing 7.7% there, combined with that overall Asia-Pacific dynamism, it strongly suggests, rapidly increasing investment in science, education, and research infrastructure in key parts of that region.
Yeah, that would make sense. What about other countries there? South Korea, Australia?
Yep, steady growth shown for both. South Korea jumps from $5.7 million to $12.4 million, that's 6.4%. And Australia from $4.8 million to $10.5 million, 6.5% CAGR.
Okay.
And there's one more category I mentioned. Southeast Asia as a collective. Starts smaller, $1.9 million in 2021, but it's projected to rise to $4.3 million by 2033. And interestingly, its CAGR matches the UK's strong 7%.
7% again. Okay, so that really reinforces the idea of pretty widespread, strong growth across Asia-Pacific.
Certainly seems to point that way.
All right, let's look at South America next. The data gives us country specifics here too, right? Helps see where the activity is concentrated.
It does. Brazil comes out on top for the region in market size.
Okay.
Growing from $7.8 million in 2021 up to $16.3 million by 2033. That's expanding at a 6.6% CAGR.
6.6%, that's strong. Above the global average.
It is. Argentina shows healthy growth as well, from $3.3 million to $6.8 million. That's 6.4%, so very close to Brazil's pace.
Okay.
Also solid. Projected from $2.1 million to $4.3 million, with a 6.5% CAGR.
Pretty consistent rates across those three.
Mostly, yeah. The data does note producing slightly slower growth, though still positive.
How much slower?
From $1.4 million to $2.6 million, 5.6%. And Chile is projected from $1 million to $2 million, which marks a 6% CAGR.
Okay, so overall, solid growth across the major South American economies listed, if maybe a little varied.
That seems a fair summary based on the numbers here.
All right, finally, the Middle East and Africa. We have specific countries here too.
Yes. Egypt is forecasted to grow from $3.2 million in 2021 to $6.6 million by 2033. That's with a healthy 6.4% CAGR.
6.4%. Okay.
Yeah.
Comparable to many others we've seen.
And Turkey follows closely behind that pace, growing from $2.5 million to $5.2 million, at 6.6% CAGR.
Also strong figures, yeah.
And-
Comparable to Brazil, Colombia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the data points out a pretty stark contrast
Oh.
for the category labeled Rest of the Middle East.
Okay, what does it show?
Here, growth slows way down. The market moves from $1.4 million to just $1.9 million over that whole period.
And the CAGR?
Just 1.8%.
Wow, only 1.8%. That is a contrast.
It's striking, isn't it? Seeing 6.4% and 6.6% in Egypt and Turkey, right next to 1.8% for the rest of the Middle East. It suggests that, based purely on these numbers, investment in these specific educational or research tools is heavily concentrated in just a few key countries within that broader region.
Yeah, that difference really stands out. Okay, so we've gone through the global numbers, the regional breakdowns, when growth is really taking off. What's fascinating here, I think, is stepping back and thinking about what this data signals when you connect all these dots.
Right. It's more than just a market size report, isn't it? Seeing this, thriving market across education research sectors globally.
Yeah.
And particularly those exceptional growth rates we saw in places like India, the UK, China, Brazil. It tells a story.
It really does. That consistent, even accelerating trajectory. It seems to signal increasing global investment in botanical education, sure, but also in life sciences more broadly.
And crucially, in interactive, tangible learning tools.
Exactly. It strongly suggests that even now, in a world, saturated with digital resources, these physical, detailed anatomical models, they remain absolutely crucial for that hands-on understanding, for deep learning.
Couldn't agree more. So, tracking the seemingly niche market, it isn't just about the models themselves. It really shows us where resources are being directed globally.
Right. In science education, in buying foundational research tools.
And it reflects this continued belief, it seems, in the value of physical representation for understanding complex biology.
Okay, so let's try to sum up this deep dive, based purely on the source data you send us. The market for plant anatomical models isn't just significant, valued at $221.2 million in 2021, projected to hit $460.5 million by 2033.
Which is substantial in itself.
Right, but it's also experiencing substantial, pretty consistent growth globally, that overall 6.3% CAGR.
And the data clearly highlights those standout growth areas.
Yeah.
India, with its really impressive 7.7% CAGR, the UK at 7%, plus strong expansion in China, Brazil, and others.
Yeah, indicating where a lot of this increasing investment in these tangible life science education tools seems to be concentrated geographically.
Exactly.
So, given this significant and in some places accelerating growth we've seen in the numbers across different regions, here's maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay.
What does the robust and growing demand for physical plant anatomical models right now in the digital age tell us about broader trends, about scientific education, about the tools we feel are needed to truly understand complex fields like life sciences in depth today? Does it suggest, maybe, that certain foundations of learning are just irreplaceable, regardless of technological advancement?
It certainly suggests that the fundamental need for tangible, hands-on learning aids persists. And investment in them isn't just robust, it's actively growing globally, according to this data.
Something to think about. Well, thanks for sending us the sources for this deep dive.
Yeah, this was interesting stuff.
We hope this helped you unpack this market and get a clear, insightful picture of what the data shows.
Welcome to our deep dive.
Hi there.
Today we're looking into something quite specific, actually the market for plant anatomical models.
That's right. We're talking about those really detailed, lifelike models you see. Replicas of plant parts, from cells right up to, say, root systems.
And they're definitely not just museum pieces. You find them actively used in, STEM classrooms, research labs, definitely.
Conservation centers, botanical gardens, too, for educating the public. They're pretty versatile tools.
Exactly. And for this exploration, we're leaning on some great insights from cognitive market research.
Yes, they've put out a really thorough analysis. It's called the Plant Anatomical Models Market, Growth and Innovation.
So our mission today is basically to distill that research for you. We want to pull out the key drivers, what's pushing the market forward.
And also the restraints, what's holding it back, plus the emerging trends that are kind of reshaping things.
And importantly, everything we discuss comes directly from that cognitive market research report.
Think of this as your quick guide, a way to get up to speed on a market that's, quietly doing some important work in education and research.
Okay, great. Let's dive in then. Based on the research, what are the main things really fueling demand for these models?
Well, the report really highlights the big global push towards STEM education. That's number one.
So more science funding overall.
It's partly that, but the research points more specifically to how curricula are changing. There's a much stronger emphasis now on practical, hands-on learning.
Right. And the report suggested these plant models are perfect for that, didn't it?
Exactly. They noted how these models really help students grasp the spatial relationships within complex structures.
Something flat diagrams or even computer images sometimes struggle with, that tactile 3D experience.
Precisely. You can touch it, turn it around. That makes a real difference for understanding. And tied into that, the second driver is manufacturing innovation.
Okay, how so? What did cognitive market research find there?
They looked closely at things like advanced 3D printing, multi-material printing specifically, and also high-precision molding techniques.
So it's beyond just printing a basic shape.
Oh, definitely. The report indicates these technologies allow for incredible accuracy down to micron-level details sometimes.
Yeah.
And the multi-material aspect is key. It means they can create models with different textures, different rigidities, all in one piece. Think flexible leaf tissue bonded to a rigid stem.
Which makes them way more realistic, I imagine, and probably easier to produce than assembling lots of tiny parts like in the old days.
Exactly. Much more realistic, and it streamlines production. The report also mentioned a related point about materials.
Yes, durability and eco-friendly options.
Right. Institutions are increasingly looking for models made from more sustainable materials, which aligns with their own green initiatives. That's becoming a factor in purchasing decisions.
That makes sense. A significant shift on the supply side.
It is. And the third main driver the report identified is this growing interest in botanical research and environmental conservation.
Okay, how do the...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
And environmental conservation.
Okay, how do the models fit in there specifically?
Well, cognitive market research found they're really vital for training new researchers. They act as standard visual aids for studying plant physiology.
I see.
And they're also becoming key tools for public engagement in places like botanical gardens or conservation centers, helping people visualize and understand plant health, environmental issues.
At a really fundamental structural level.
Yeah.
So, to recap the drivers, STEM education's practical focus, enabled by advanced manufacturing and boosted by botany and conservation needs.
That covers the main growth forces, according to the research.
The markets always have challenges. What did the report identify as the main hurdles, the restraints?
First and foremost, the cost. High production costs.
Even with the new tech?
Yes. While the tech helps with complexity and realism, creating these highly accurate, detailed models often still requires specialized materials, quite a bit of post-processing work like painting.
Finishing touches, yeah.
And the production runs tend to be relatively small compared to, say, mass-market toys or general school supplies. All that adds up.
And that final price tag, as the report pointed out, can be a real barrier, can't it? Especially for schools or smaller labs with tight budgets.
Definitely. It raises questions about equitable access to these kinds of quality learning tools.
A fair point. What was the second restraint?
Limited awareness, particularly the report noted in some emerging markets.
Is that because the subject isn't taught as much, or something else?
The research suggests it might be a mix. In some places, the botanical curriculum itself might still be developing, so the specific value of using these detailed 3D models beyond just basic charts isn't fully recognized or prioritized yet.
So educators might not see the need or know the benefits clearly enough to justify the cost.
That seems to be the idea. It naturally slows down adoption if people aren't aware of the pedagogical advantages.
Makes sense. And the third main restraint?
Challenges around standardization. This was interesting.
How so? Lack of standards.
Cognitive market research found that while there are some efforts, there aren't really universal, agreed-upon standards. This leads to inconsistencies between models from different makers.
Inconsistent in what way? Like the scale or the accuracy?
The report mentioned things like taxonomic accuracy, but also the developmental stage being represented.
So one company's root model might show an early seedling stage, another might show a fully mature plant.
Exactly. And that makes it difficult if you're an educator trying to teach a specific sequence or a researcher needing models that represent a consistent life stage for comparison.
Right, that lack of consistency would be a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so the main hurdles are cost, awareness gaps, and standardization issues.
Those are the key ones highlighted.
But despite those challenges, the market isn't static. This is where it gets quite exciting, the trends. What big shifts did cognitive market research flag?
Okay, trend number one, and it's a big one. the integration of augmented and virtual reality, AR and VR.
Oh, interesting. So going beyond the physical model.
Yeah. The report indicates that while physical models are still seen as foundational, more and more institutions are exploring or even starting to use AR overlays on physical models or creating fully virtual plant anatomy labs.
Wow. So you could point your tablet at a model and see extra info, or even like virtually fly through a plant cell.
Precisely that kind of thing. The research noted AR/VR is especially good for showing dynamic processes, nutrient transport, water moving through tissues.
Things that are hard to show in a static model.
Exactly. Or allowing students to do virtual dissections without needing lots of expensive physical models. It's seen as a supplement, enhancing the physical experience.
That sounds incredibly powerful for learning. Okay, what's trend number 2?
Customization and modular designs. The report found there's growing demand, especially from educators, for models that aren't just one solid piece. They want models that can perhaps be tailored to specific lessons.
Or models that students can take apart and put back together.
Yes, exactly. Modular models with components that snap or fit together. This allows for much deeper interaction, more hands-on exploration.
Like building the flower structure yourself to understand it.
Right. Cognitive market research suggested this really aligns with the pedagogical shift towards more active, inquiry-based learning. You're not just looking, you're doing.
That makes total sense. Adapting the tool to the teaching style. And the final major trend.
Sustainability, both in the materials used and the production processes.
We touched on materials earlier with the drivers, but this is broader.
Yes. The report emphasized this is moving beyond just a nice to have. It's becoming a real market differentiator.
So buyers are actively looking for greener options.
Increasingly so.
Yeah.
Especially institutions, government-funded labs, universities, they're prioritizing vendors who use things like biodegradable plastics, recycled content, or can show they have low-waste manufacturing.
Cognitive market research framed this as a direct response to wider environmental concerns and those institutional sustainability mandates we talked about.
Absolutely. Manufacturers who adapt are definitely gaining a competitive advantage now. It shows the market is responding to these bigger global values.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've taken a deep dive into the plant anatomical models market, guided by the findings from cognitive market research.
And we've seen it's a market really being pushed by the specific needs of modern STEM teaching.
Enabled by some pretty sophisticated manufacturing tech.
And finding growing relevance in botany and conservation, too.
But it's also navigating some real challenges, those high production costs being a major one.
Along with the need to build more awareness in certain regions and the tricky issue of standardization.
Yet, the future looks dynamic. We're seeing these exciting trends like AR and VR adding new dimensions.
A demand for more interactive, customizable physical models.
And this really significant shift towards sustainability in how they're made.
The report really paints a picture of a niche but evolving market, using technology smartly to meet changing needs in how we learn about and research the plant world.
So whether you're listening as an educator, maybe a researcher, or perhaps you're just interested in that intersection of technology, nature, and learning, there's some fascinating dynamics at play here.
And just to reiterate, all these insights we've discussed today stem directly from that comprehensive analysis by cognitive market research.
Right. So maybe a final thought to leave you with, based on what the research uncovered. With immersive AR and VR offering these dynamic views and physical models becoming more customizable and hands-on, how might that fundamental experience of learning plant anatomy really change for the next generation of students and researchers?
That's a great question. Something to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.